You're watching Global Trade This Week with Pete Mento and Doug Draper.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another exciting edition of Global Trade This Week. I'm Pete Mento, and with me is my dear friend and co-host, Doug Draper. Doug, how's it going?
Pete, I'm not as excited as you are, but it's Monday. I'm in Colorado. It's sunny, and how do we always talk about weather? I don't know. I just default to weather every time you and I get together.
We're going to talk about hip replacements and 401ks next. Just a matter of time, buddy.
And losing hair. But anyway, it's been good. It's a nice weekend, and I think nothing really of substance has happened to me in the last 7 days, which is good. So,
yeah, it is good, isn't it? Right? It's great.
It is. I don't have any crazy stories of my new home up in Steamboat, which is good. It means money's not being poured out of my back pocket. So yeah, things are good.
Good, buddy. Good.
Where does this your background every time we get together changes? So where are you? Where does this podcast find you today?
I'm in the Indianapolis office of TSV. Some of my favorite people in the company work here. They're very nice people. And I will be here for the next 4 days doing sales calls. So as soon as I'm done here, I have to get out of the office and do 2 sales calls. And then I'm driving all over Indiana doing sales calls this week. So going to Elkhart, never been to Elkhart. Going to Fort Wayne, haven't been there in a long time. So I'm excited. Go out and visit with customers and potential customers and see what I can do about bringing them over.
Nice. Very cool. Very
well,
good.
I kicked off the show, Doug, so that means that you get to go first. So what's going on, pal?
Gotcha. Well, this one, we can kind of, tag team a little bit on this topic, but it's kind of weird. So my topic is related to China to the U.S. container volumes seem to be up despite the economic instability in China, right? So there's the real estate implosion that we've spoken about, Evergrande liquidation. I don't know if you're a 60 Minutes guy at all, but they interviewed the ambassador to China yesterday. I watch 60 Minutes like twice a year, and I happened to catch that one last night. Did you see it?
Yeah, I record it so I can watch it. I love it.
Yeah. That ambassador, I can't remember his name, but he seems like a pretty legit guy. But my whole point is that he made mention of the Evergrande liquidation, and they did this whole thing out there as far as the number of apartments that have just been abandoned. It's crazy. So you got this real estate implosion, you got high unemployment that we've kind of heard about. Their stock market's in decline, but the ocean container inbound business, from what I read this morning on a Freightways article, was that it's higher than it's been since May of 2022, which was like pandemic central at that time. So it's just weird that I almost said it's like the Cookie Monster effect, right? And I take this from you as far as Cookie Monster just gobbling up and consuming as much as he possible. So now that inventories have been burned off, interest rates are somewhat stable. Seems like our economy is starting to level off. But the economic and political landscape doesn't seem to jive. So it's almost like this: imports are increasing, but the instability, specifically to that 60 Minutes thing that we spoke about, it's as unstable as it's been in many, many years. So it's like this, it's this weird, yin and yang may not be the right, because that means more complementary, but it's this weird situation that we're in, that the Cookie Monster effect is happening. Everything's been kind of right-sized here in the United States. There's so much instability economically, politically, militarily, but yet we're still saying we need to buy from China. And it's kind of like the infrastructure's there already. Yes, people are looking to alternative sourcing strategies, and that is happening. We've seen a lot of documented processes where people are nearshoring or friendshoring. But still, when push comes to shove and you need to gobble up in the consumer here in the United States, where do you go? You go to where infrastructure already exists. You go to where prices are are affordable, and I think the Temu and Shein appetite is part of that. People just want things now, and it was funny. My wife, my last thing on this, Pete, then I'll kick it over to you. So my wife bought a swimsuit, right? It's getting close to the springtime, and got to do a swimsuit, and she didn't quite work out. She wanted to return it. She couldn't find the receipt. It just came in a bag, and she kind of found this email because she ordered it a while back, and they replied via text message. They didn't reply in an email. It was very informal, a lot of broken English, and they pretty much said, just keep it. We'll give you 20% off your next purchase, which speaks to the fact that returning it, because nobody's going to return it to China because that's exactly where it came from directly, right? So anyway, my whole point here, Pete, is there's so much instability in China, but yet volumes are up, people are consuming, everything's been right-sized here in the United States, and it just doesn't seem to jive, right? I don't know if that's good or bad. It's just an observation from my part.
That's an excellent observation. I heard I guess it's a theory, right? And I've read a couple of articles about it now. With deflation so bad in China, and with unemployment and businesses struggling so much, they've been just dropping prices as hard as they can to try to entice people to get into production, to buy things. They're saying, well, you have enough, but look at these prices. Better get it while the getting's good before things get better on consumables that you should put into inventory that you might use in the future. That's not going to be enough to make up for the difference that we're seeing here. The vast amount of that really just has to do with the fact that people in America are still buying a bunch of stuff. So consumer confidence is pretty high right now. And it's really a function more of our faith in the current market and the fact that Americans are working and they have disposable income, even with inflation. And with regards to your return issue, it's pretty common, right? People say, don't bother sending it back to us, just keep it, because it would cost them more to ship it back and it would just take away all their profits. And most people aren't going to use that 20% off going forward. So it is pretty common. They end up in, some Goodwill thrift store rather than being worn or given to some friend of yours who it might fit or that might like it, rather than just shipping it back. So that's pretty common, man. But I'll be watching those container rates and watching the volumes pretty closely over the course of the next quarter in particular. Now that we're going to start seeing the numbers for Chinese New Year, because I think it's going to be consistent with what you've said. I think it's going to be a pretty consistent market.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, we'll wait and see. All right. What's your first stab? What's your first go at it?
Well, being Chicken Little and telling the universe that it's only a matter of time before we have a major cyber attack. Boy, did I have a weird week last week. There's a couple of things that happened. We had an FBI report that came out 2 weeks ago that explained the Chinese attacks or attempted attacks on infrastructure. And then we had a huge AT&T issue where AT&T, let's be clear about this, is saying it was not a hack, that it was an internal software issue. And that's what they're saying, so that's what I'm going to believe. But to me, when I start seeing that there's hundreds of thousands, when it was all said and done, Americans that were unable to use their cell phone, it was bedlam. It was chaos. And then think about the things that affects. When your phone's not working, you can't use Uber and Lyft. When your phone's not working, right, you can't access all of the applications that you use on a daily basis to make your life easier. When your phone's not working, I wonder if your Tesla will still start. It's issues like this that really got my attention. And it wasn't that big of a service issue when you look at the number of people. It's a big service issue for AT&T. And they're being kind. They're offering a $5 refund because that's
I saw that.
A day's worth of service would cost. But it goes into that bigger conversation about how America would manage in the event of a real cyber breakdown. And we had another report come out last week. The United States is going to be replacing all of our port infrastructure in the form of cranes where they were purchased from China and using a particular system, because it's been determined that it's just not something we'd be comfortable with if we went to war with China. They're just sitting there ready for the taking. So you're talking about probably $100 billion when all is done to replace all these cranes with companies that are friendly to the United States. The problem is nearly every crane in the world works off of the same Chinese operating system. So they may have to come up with their own operating system to manage it. Doug, I the conspiracy theorist in me, when it happened last week, I immediately thought this is a test. This is a test to see what would happen, and I'm looking forward to the post-incident report with AT&T to understand it. But this is the level of dependency that Americans have on technology. Take it away from us, our country falls apart.
Yeah, good point. The one thing you said that made me laugh was the post report. What'd you say? You want to see what you AT&T?
Yeah.
Anyway, that's just a funny comment that you made.
Post-incident report. Why?
There you go. Yeah, that'll be a good read for sure.
Okay.
So,
all right. Well, that brings us to halftime, buddy. Go ahead.
Yeah. No, I like this one, man. Sometimes, morning of, I'm like, what's out there in the world that's interesting that we can bring to the halftime, because it's pretty much whatever you and I want to talk about, unrelated to our industry. So I saw this one. I literally laughed out loud, and I probably will do the same thing as I'm reading these because it is so awesome. So in St. Augustine, Florida, this past weekend, they had the Florida Man Games, which is essentially where they poke fun at the state's reputation for like bizarre stories that relate to booze and fights and guns. And, there was one quote that said, this was from somebody that attended it, the stupidity occur on the grandest, most spectacular scale. So here's what transpired, and here's some of the events that happened at the Florida Man Games this weekend. So first of all, every participant had to wear a tank top and cut-off jean shorts. They played the Star Spangled Banner on an electric guitar. And then whenever they were having all of the teams parade out, the audience was encouraged to drink beer and yell expletives at them. So here's the first event. They had to eat a whole bunch of barbecue and chug a beer. That's not that big of a deal. This one just cracked me up. It was a theft simulation relay. So the competitors had to race while carrying bicycle, copper pipes, and catalytic converters. There was another one where they had to run from actual sheriff deputies while they were jumping fences and other obstacles. And then there was a scramble. It was called a cash grab, where they simulated a hurricane and threw a bunch of money in the air, and everybody had to try to catch money. And one of the participants was interviewed, and they said that, he said, they're calling these events. I'm calling this a freaking Tuesday afternoon, as far as I'm concerned. So it's just, I love it. The thing is, like, if you Google, my kid sent it to me once, like Florida Man, and then you put in the date, right? So you could say Florida Man, February 26, 20, and it would come up with some outlandish story that just is not even anyway. It's just comical. So anyway, the Florida Man Games, you and I are going to have to get down there and do a live broadcast on next year's event.
I don't think I've ever wanted a field trip more, Doug. This seems like our kind of event. After you sent it this morning, I actually looked real quick on YouTube, and the videos were hysterical. I guess one of the events was trying to throw a live gator through a drive-through window.
I didn't see that.
This just seems like the kind of thing that we need to go to. I think that it would just be hours of content, and talk about embracing, the haters. I just think it's wonderful.
Yeah.
And I really hope that when they were running from the sheriffs, they had flip-flops on.
Really, I don't know, but it's just, you know what? It's all good fun. They're making fun of themselves and the stereotypes. And the tickets were $45, and they sold 5,000 tickets.
Wow, where'd the money go? For bail?
Yeah, there you go. We'll just say it was for bail.
Yeah, I would hope that it was.
Yeah.
Well, my halftime's a little bit different, buddy. Last week we had a bit of a sneaker drop, and you know that I'm a sneakerhead. You're aware of this, right?
Yeah, movie buff and sneakerhead.
I love the sneakers, buddy. And Donald Trump dropped his shoes last week, and they're pretty unattractive footwear. Let's just be honest. I mean, bright gold lame high tops with American flags on them, and then his low tops as well. The low rise sneakers, also very unattractive. But of course, they sold out immediately. They sold out like crazy. I don't even know how many pairs they made, but it was almost as though the second that they dropped, people just ran out and bought them as fast as they could. Now, I'm not going to talk about Trump necessarily, but I think every celebrity needs to do this. If there was a Charlie Sheen branded tennis shoe, I would buy it. If there was, you name it, whatever celebrity is up against it right now. Lindsay Lohan flip flops, I'm getting them, right? Like whatever they are. I think this is an excellent way to embrace the fact that the world is kind of making fun of you by coming out with your own footwear and making it yours. So, Doug, you going to run out and buy yourself some Trump Air Force Ones?
No, and that has nothing to do one way or another with political beliefs. I'm not that big of a I am kind of a shoe guy, but yeah, they got to look good. And those shoes were just tacky, and I think they made 3,000 and they sold out within minutes from what I understand. But yeah, it's a strange looking shoe, but you know what? There'll probably be something crazy like that that's going to come out in the next 7 to 8 months anyway.
Now, when you bought them, Doug, you also get a bottle of his cologne, Victory Cologne, which has his head as the stopper. I'm sure it's the best cologne, the greatest fragrance ever. Nothing better. Absolutely incredible. I'm thinking about buying some of that as gifts for certain friends of mine that would not appreciate it for holiday gifts. Yeah.
Love it. Yes. That's crazy. Well, Halftime always brought to us by Cap Logistics. Please give them a look at caplogistics.com. We can't thank them enough for the platform they give to us every single week. So I don't know, who kicks off the second part here? Is it me or you? All right. So mine is going into transportation logistics. I'm just going to pull up, you go without notes. I go with notes here, Pete. So, but I saw that Walmart is transitioning out of the rail sector and all the assets that they had with their 53-foot boxes they put on the rail, right? So they're intermodal containers. So I didn't even realize this, but they had 14,000 intermodal containers that they actually had ownership of, and they're getting rid of those and they're selling them, or transitioning them is the term, to J.B. Hunt, which happens to be another Arkansas-based company. And the financials weren't disclosed, so I don't know how they're taking it over. But the thing that caught me on this, Pete, is during COVID, you and I spoke multiple times about the vertical integration that we saw during COVID. And we literally referred to it as owning the rails, no pun intended, where if you need to get stuff moved during COVID, let's just control it all, right? So you had these retailers, and Amazon was in the play with chartering vessels. Everybody wanted to own every aspect of the supply chain. So Walmart just sold their intermodal boxes, and last week they just bought Vizio, right, which seems to be more in line. So is there a shift from vertical integration that we saw during COVID back to let's refocus on our core business? The Walmart is a key example. The other thing this does is it bumps up their eco push, right? And you and I have spoken about, if I was in the rail business, I would be jumping up and down so hard and raising my hand so high to talk about the reduction in the carbon footprint that happens when you move things on rail versus rubber wheels and over the road. So I don't know, is this going to be a growing trend where companies are saying, forget it, COVID's behind us, we need to refocus on what our core competency is? And then is this abandonment that is my comment, happening too fast, right? They wanted to integrate to control, and now Walmart is an example of getting rid and shedding some of those assets and saying, we're going to focus on what we're good at, which is selling stuff in our big box and online. I don't know, man. What do you think about that?
I think it's kind of a combination of all those things. I think that there may be some accounting moves here, right, where you could do very well on your spreadsheet if you dump a bunch of assets and try to make some money off of it after you've gotten what you wanted out of it before you completely depreciate them. I think that Walmart moves in such large volumes that their ability to sell these in a market right now, they can probably get a hell of a lot for what they're export, for what they're shipping. These might not stay in the U.S. Remember that these intermodal containers are international. They could be used in a lot of other places. Of note today, the Walton family trust sold $1.5 billion worth of their shares in Walmart, which is nothing. They own like 45% of the company. And I think this is more of a trying to get it while the getting's good. And you've gotten the most you could out of your assets. So let's see what we can get now that they're not necessarily needed. They control so much transportation and so much logistics. They're a market leader in all those things. This is probably a very calculated decision on what makes more sense, renting them and owning them, and then trying to make money off of it while the getting's good. So I think it's a combination of all the things you said, Doug. I don't think it's just one. Mm-hmm. But I'm not sure that it means that they're moving away from owning the rails. I think it's more likely what this is a good sign of is just intelligent business decisions on what they've got when it comes to their assets. But I guess we'll find out when the numbers come out.
Yeah, we'll see what other companies are going to be doing along those lines. So, all right, bring us home, my friend.
Well, I read a very learned, interesting article that was in the Financial Times that talked about the constant friction between a China who is doing as much as they can to subsidize certain businesses and an America who's trying to put tariffs in place to fight it. And it really comes down to this argument about how do we enforce all these things? You know, China's doing what they need to do to keep their government active in commerce and keep people busy and keep people employed. And the United States is doing everything they can to try to stop China from decimating our business here locally by importing such low-cost goods. And really the gist of the argument philosophically is, do we need to come up with a way to enforce global trade differently? Has the method that we've done it for years through the World Trade Organization, does there need to be a revamp of all of it, given how large these two economies are and how trade is being used in a very strategic way, almost like economic warfare? And I would say yes. I think we need to start considering ways for us to enforce global trade and enforce defectors in global trade in a way that we're actually going to be able to get them to come to heel for what they've done. The United States could very easily put that 60% tariff on everything imported that President Trump's talked about. And it would have a dire effect, in my opinion, on the global economy, not just the United States. And China can continue to just dump money into production because people really don't hold them to task for doing it. And that's because the current regime of enforcement maybe isn't as effective as it could be.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a good point. It kind of goes to the, again, I can't think of the right, not dichotomy, but all these sanctions and stuff, and we're going to drop, potentially additional tariffs depending on what happens in November. But yet people are consuming. And if I have to make a widget and set up my infrastructure in another country, or it exists already and you can just, plug and play coming out of China, I mean, every single time that's going to work if your ultimate goal is a financial angle on it. So I don't know, that'll be interesting. And I think it'll be pretty stable for until the election. Everything just kind of halts. Everything slows down on election year. So we shall see.
Then we'll see some crazy stuff post-election, baby.
I think we're going to continue to lean more political as things go on, which we said we wouldn't do, Pete. So we got to check ourselves when we come up with our weekly topics.
No politics.
Cool. Awesome. Well, thanks for joining us in Indianapolis, Pete. As always, you're traveling around the country, and we make time every week to bring this show to our audience. And we want to thank everybody for listening. We want to thank Keenan for making it happen on the other side. And again, as always, thanks for listening and enjoying. If you have any comments about our shows, any suggested topics, just pop it out there when these things go out into the world. So, Pete, good to see you, my friend. Everybody, thanks for listening. And we'll catch you next week on another edition of Global Trade This Week. Take care.
Bye.
Later.